On a macro level for yourself, what's your big mission to build wealth? What's the why behind it?
Few reasons. One, launching a property management company at just about 40 years old wiped out all the cash I had. Definitely have some retirement to recover in a short amount of time. So one thing, it's important to me to get caught up quick. We would love to have our kids around us as we're older, but my wife and I don't want them to take care of us. We don't want to have to lean on them for that. My parents had to do that. Her parents had to do that as they got older. So we want to avoid that by being able to afford the care we need. So that's one reason. The second reason is to set an example for my kids that
Aaron Robertson, thank you so much for being with me. I am excited to get into your property management business. I hear where you started and then really how your real estate investing tactics, really, and how you've acquired some residential and commercial property. So, super excited to have you. Thanks for being here.
glad to. Thanks for the invite. It'll be great to spend some time with you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, cool. So you started your management company in 2015. You started from zero. Just kind of walk us through that. Like what got you into property management and then, kind of where has it grown since then?
It's kind of interesting how I got in property management. I originally wanted to be an appraiser. And so I went to college, took all the classes to be an appraiser. And while I was there, I thought, well, I'll take all the real estate classes too. And then when I graduated, I started calling around for appraisers. And in California at that time, you had to have 1,500 hours on the book with a mentor. And so I started calling around asking who could help with that. And all of them weren't very kind to me. It was clear they had no intentions of training their competitor, and they were very forward about it. Um, Heard some harsh things. One guy did say, I'm happy to do it for you. You will work all 1,500 hours before I sign you off and you don't get paid. And I was like, wow, that's like 30 hours a week for 9 months. And I still have a job. So that's kind of hard. So the opportunity to go into appraisal, unless maybe you have an uncle that'll sign off that you've done the hours or something, kind of evaporated for me. And then I decided to go get my real estate license. Previously, I was running restaurants for garden restaurants. I ran an Olive Garden specifically. And I was really looking for a way to get out of working every holiday and every weekend. And as you know, if you jump into sales, right, you can expect to work every holiday, every weekend, every Sunday for your open houses. And really just wasn't interested in that. So dove into property management. So that's how I ended up landing here.
Man, there's some about recurring revenue too that is very intriguing, right? I mean, of course, we're sticking or stacking nickels to make a dollar a lot of times, but man, it's recurring. I love it. You have a lot. I always compared, real estate sales and property management as one you get to marry, that's property management, and one you get to date.
So true.
I never did sales, so I don't really understand that world that well. I'm always stuck to property management. So kudos. Okay, so cool. Great. So you guys are around 1,000 doors, 12 employees, have scaled a nice portfolio. My objective is to really shed light on the ability to use a property management company as a wealth uh, foundation, if you will, to generate wealth in outside of property management. I view a single source of income as a risk in life. Um, and finding additional sources of income, it just gives so much peace of mind. And you have been able to acquire some properties through the management company. Kind of talk me through like what was that paradigm shift? Like, hey, I'm gonna talk to clients here, and maybe we could acquire some doors.
Sure, sure. So a couple things, I think property managers are very blessed to really be on the front line for when maybe trouble is brewing. Couple of indicators sometimes that we'll see, like maybe as an example, I have a young lady that was gifted 2 fourplexes from her grandmother. This was probably a year ago. I think grandmother also gifted her about $150,000 worth of deferred maintenance. And I don't think the grandmother left behind any cash. So, as we're working through with this owner and we're seeing how she has to go about finding money or utilization of credit cards or refinancing to get money, pretty big indicator that she's in financial trouble. We know that she wants to hold on to the units basically because she wants to, further her grandmother's memory and gift. But we're starting in this example to see the writing on the wall that it might be time for her to maybe sell one of those to us at a good rate because she can't afford the maintenance, have the extra cash on hand to the other. So one, I think, is really just listening to your clients and what's happening. I think they're pretty honest with us. At least mine are. If I call them and tell them their water heater's blown out and they use the F word, it's pretty obvious they don't love owning their rental. That can give you some real key indicators. I think that they may be on the fence about wanting to part with it, and the timing might be right to maybe have a conversation with them.
Yeah, I love that. I think, so often clients are willing to kinda share the several Ds in their life, right? Divorce, distress, distraction is often a thing, and if we just ask the questions, a lot of people don't wanna ask, but look, hey, it's tough sometimes owning a rental property, especially if somebody isn't, a professional at it, and they don't treat it like a business, if you will, and oftentimes I feel like, it's just a huge opportunity just to have a conversation. Um, so tell me how, like, when you have those conversations, kinda how do you guide those when you're listening to your clients to, into a purchase opportunity?
Sure. So, like in the last one that we did for a commercial property, we started talking about future budgets is kind of a great way to open that door. Maybe mention that you've been to visit the property, that you can see some capital expenses coming in the near future and what that might look like cost wise. And then you can gauge, how they're feeling. If you mentioned, we're probably due for exterior paint, probably looking at a roof in 5 years, and you start talking about $25,000 worth of repairs, you can quickly see if they have that or they don't. We're kind of blessed in our area. The properties don't appreciate here as quickly as other areas, like maybe the Bay Area or down south of us. So, the position that we're in is a lot of folks have held it thinking that, after 10 years of ownership, they would be up, $150,000 and they're more like up 40 or 50. So by the time they pay their capital gains taxes, there's not a lot left. So, they don't want to continue to just keep putting much money in it unless it has a large cash flow. But talking about future expenses and what's coming is a great way to gauge where they're at. We do that for two reasons. One, to kind of see how long they'll be willing to keep the property in amazing condition. That way we're managing decent properties. Two, their willingness to provide good properties to the market, right? To the people that are renting them. And then if we can see that they're wobbling, then we start to think if the timing is right for maybe approaching them on a conversation to pick it up. Obviously, we're also blessed because we have all the numbers, right? We create the P&L, so we know exactly where every dollar went, and we don't have to infer any details. Maybe for those that don't know what I mean by inferring details, I was looking at a commercial deal last week. It's a 30-plex. The owner's maintenance for last year was roughly about $3,000. So that seems pretty far off. Uh,
Yeah. Wow.
two water heaters, right? So we had to infer that that wasn't going to be very accurate.
Yep.
But after digging in, we found out he's handling all of his repairs. He's billing all of the items out to his commercial plumbing business for the complex, so he can take deductions on his business instead of on the rental for sort of tax advantage. So, but that gives you those opportunities to have the real world data that we really need.
How do you compare cash flow versus, appreciation? You mentioned appreciation's not a big thing in your area, so are these cash flow plays for you?
Almost always, yeah. Yeah, unless we're under the impression the property happens to be in a great place, that it's all about the location and that holding it for the future will change the appreciation, then we're always looking for the cash flow. As well as tax deductions, obviously. We're looking for the depreciation schedule so we can take advantage of the real estate in order to keep the money that we earn in our brokerage, of course.
And bonus depreciation is a beautiful thing, isn't it?
Mm. Yeah, I'm not upset about the big, beautiful bill in the slightest.
Yeah,
Actually contemplating whether or not we should build a new office due to the advantages and thinking about that right now for next year. So
yeah, I love that. Hey, we're on a mission to make this podcast the very best for you, our incredible listeners. Here's something I've noticed. Many of you who listen regularly haven't subscribed yet. And honestly, one of the easiest ways you can support us right now is by clicking that follow or subscribe button. It may seem small, but it helps extend our reach on all podcast platforms, growing the audience more than you might realize. By subscribing, you're not just helping us grow, you're helping us create more content that's crafted with you in mind. So thank you for being here. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button now. Your support means the world to us. Let's talk about kind of the financial side. So as you evaluate these properties, are you paying cash for these? Are you asking for some traditional lending or even some private finance, if you will, like seller finance options? Like, how do you negotiate these terms?
depends on the owner and their position, which usually we have a pretty good idea of that too, whether they own the property free and clear. But that's usually our first question. We always want to explore all different sorts of ideas anytime we're having a conversation with somebody. Um, Because even though you might have a great lender and you might be able to get some pretty favorable terms, an owner might just offer you 5%, over 7 years or something like that for a pickup. Why wouldn't you do that? And there's no reason not to. So we try to leave that door wide open. First question we usually ask is, do you own it free and clear? If you were to sell it, what's your expectations? What do you plan to do with cash? So you can see if they're looking to move it to maybe another opportunity, if they're looking to buy a houseboat because it's retirement time, and that was always the plan. So we leave that wide open, and it's kind of our experience, maybe a little bit due to their inexperience, that they will share a vast amount of knowledge with you without having to create a lot of follow-up questions.
What would you tell a property manager that has never bought any real estate and never bought any real estate from their portfolio?
Hurry up.
Like, what are you waiting on?
Yes, yes. I think if you have the cash and you can do it, I think it's a great place to put your money. I mean, obviously, follow the guidelines that everybody wants to be diverse. So you should have money in lots of different places. But I think we have a huge advantage as a property manager. One, we can curb the entire management fees. So that would take some properties that don't cash flow at all for a property owner and turn it into a $300 a month win for us, because we're able to control the cost of that on our side through our business. So I think that's a huge advantage. It allows you to kind of bend the rule a little bit. Some folks have this rule that it must cash flow. There are times that I'll buy a property that's a few $100s upside down a month, not really think anything of it, only because I think I could give that $200 that month to the Edward Jones guy and see how he does with it. Or I could put that in real estate. I'm quite confident if it's real estate I own and manage, I'll do much better than the 200 a month. So we're not afraid to buy properties that might just be a little bit upside down. And when we're in California, we have rent control. So sometimes you might have to buy a property that's
Mm.
upside down, and it may be that way for 2 years based on how quickly you can move the rent. But for the property managers out there that aren't buying from their portfolio, I would definitely tell you to dig into it if you have the cash. I mean, it's a great place to park some money. It's going to be managed right. It's kind of interesting, the properties that are in our database that we own. I think the team manages those twice as well. Like, they really don't want to have a misstep on it if Jillian and I own it.
What if a property manager doesn't have any cash? Like, how do you advise them to start to build some wealth?
Two things. I would probably look at my books very closely and see how much cash I could begin to set aside and start that journey on some sort of a percentage, even if it's only, 3% of your net, so that you can put that to the side and start getting prepared. But sometimes an owner maybe doesn't want to part with the property and doesn't want any cash up front.
Mm.
We were entertaining a conversation about 3 months ago where an owner really hates owning the property. It for whatever reason, keeps him up at night, which is crazy because the issues he experiences with us in the middle, in my mind, are, it's like reading an article. There's not really anything happening, but it really bothers him for whatever reason. So we entertained a conversation with him with no money down on a piece of property, pretty heavy payment, but he wants to avoid paying all the capital gains
Mhm.
taxes up front. So be willing to have that conversation because, in the past we bought properties with no money down, or what I would consider no money down. I mean, if it's less than 10 grand to get an escrow open and pick up a property and transfer title, that's kind of no money down, really. So don't be afraid to have those conversations. You just never really know what somebody's willing to do, and what their goals are. So always ask, if you sold it, what would you do with the money? And I think that's a great opening question to figure out where they're headed.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Great opening question. All right, so let's look at the management company a little bit here. So I feel this is a personal feeling that the industry doesn't actually charge enough for the value that we provide the industry, the marketplace. So what is your thought process on gaining the fees, the revenue, if you will, from the clients that are warranted, as well as the tenants? I know California is a little different. It's harder to squeeze a lot of that, but I'm of the impression we should be increasing our revenue through fees, a fee structure annually at the very least. How do you kind of, think through that process? Because that is the lever we have to pull to gain more cash to invest, if you will.
I'm thinking of a couple things. I think one, it's interesting that you said that because sometimes when I'm, say, at a management presentation or I train my business development manager to do the same thing, and they say, you tell them your management percentage, they look at the rent and they say, oh gosh, that's like $145 a month. And I've trained him and I say to myself, well, that's probably less than you're paying the landscaper.
Yeah.
And they have a little less responsibility than we do. And they go, oh. So I think in our industry, it's kind of sad. I think everybody's been used to just throwing out this percentage and they just leave it there for years and years. And for whatever reason, the number is like 6. I don't know where that magic number came, but it's like every new property manager, that's just where they start. Having nothing to do with the cost of running their business or labor or overhead or anything. It's just 6. It's hard to compete with those folks. It really is. But I think you're absolutely right. We should be providing good service for the value and what we're charging the clients. And there's a lot of times we have to help people understand, like in our market, we do personal showings. I have a full-time person that does that. Obviously, he's not free. So when they say, I'm also interviewing X, Y, or Z, and they charge 7 and you charge almost 9, I say, well, I know X and I know Y, and I know they pass keys out to the property. Are you comfortable with that? No. So, well, make sure you're comparing apples to apples as you interview everyone. They probably save a lot of money not having a company car, offsite workers comp, all these different things, a full-time employee to handle that. So, I mean, they're much more economical rate than we do. But fact of the matter is they're not providing the service we do. But yeah, I wish property managers would charge more because there is always the part where you're stuck. You can only go so far and then you are the most expensive property manager in your marketplace. And then if you go too much farther, everybody just sees it as unreasonable. So you can't just stretch until everybody else is willing to kind of drag along the tail with you. So
I love that. I think one kind of fallback that we have in the industry is that we're really bad at communicating the value we provide. Really bad, not just as an industry, but individually. Like you said, like, hey, you need to compare apples to apples here. This other management company doesn't do these other things. But that's on the sales cycle. How do you communicate those things during the actual client cycle when they're a client? Hey, these are the things we are providing, and this is why we charge what we charge. So they're not questioning the value or the fees in which is on their owner statement.
well, 2 things. I think there's the learning how to sell that from the very beginning before you get them signed up. But then I also think it's probably even more importantly to slow down your churn rate and to communicate that along the way. Let me give you an example on something that we do. Probably many property managers out there are now familiar with Lead Simple, or they use maybe Monday.com or Asana, some processing software. And we have a huge subset of owners that really, we don't interact with them a whole lot. We don't have to call them for permission on anything. They just kind of leave us alone. And so we have different processes, and whether an owner chooses to be involved or not changes the amount of communication they get. And the property owners that are not involved as much actually get quite a bit more communication through our processing software because we want them to understand how hard we're working. Because you haven't heard from us doesn't mean we didn't do anything for you. So it's actually built into our processing software to over communicate a little bit when they've said, I don't really want to be involved. So they get an email that says, hey, it's time for your lease. We're handling it all. Kick back, relax. Don't worry about it. Hey, we had the conversation. Hey, we're initiating a new contract. Hey, it's all done and complete. Hey, your tenant signed a 6-month or a 1 year. So they're getting all of this. We're working. So they don't lose the idea that we're value. I'm sure anybody that's got more than 50 doors has probably been in a conversation where they're like, hey, property owner, you've left me a message that you want to take over the property. How and why? Well, nothing ever happens. I mean, I'm just paying you to hang out. And you're like, oh, so we managed it so good, we're getting fired. That's not a happy feeling.
No.
And usually they circle back, but it super sucks to lose a year worth of revenue. Pick up a home that was managed fantastic and it hasn't been for the last year. That always is a bummer, but you really have to communicate that value all the time and just never let the gas off.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Yeah. This is a constant beating of a drum that we struggle as an industry to do. Look, I know there's a lot of podcasts out there, and hopefully this one right here is providing you with a ton of value. We want to make the best content possible and find the best guests possible so you're getting a ton of value. The simplest way you can support us in doing that is simply by sharing this episode. So please hit the share button and share it with somebody you know who will get something out of it. Thanks for being here. We appreciate you very much. All right, let's look at the macroeconomics here a little bit. So California has had an outflux of citizenship. I think they lost over 1 million people the last few years. How has that affected markets? Have you guys seen slowing of market economies and rental rates and those types of things in your market?
Up here in our neck of the woods, no. I'm way up here in the very northern end of Northern California. I mean, another 150 miles and you're just going into Oregon, right? So we're in a really special climate that's here. We're super short on housing. Right now, in our market, for $500,000, you can buy a 4-bedroom, 3-bath, brand new house, fresh out of construction. I mean, 2,500 square foot, super nice finishes. And because of the way things work in our market, that's sort of also the only house a contractor can make any money on when they build it and sell it. So that's all that's been built here basically for probably 4 years, but our community is still growing. So we are incredibly short on housing. So those things really aren't affecting me. I do have friends that run property management companies down in Walnut Creek, and they've said that that's pretty tough. Not only that, but, our governor's really interested in not paying any attention to maybe crime or homelessness. So, a lot of neighborhoods, you really can't get somebody to enter the unit because it's driving to the unit. They weren't happy with what they saw on the way to the showing, and they just say never mind. He tells me he's, having some real challenges with that.
On that new build house that you described, what does that type of house rent for?
So we kind of in our area have, due to the median income and the way incomes are here, we really can't crest $3,000 on virtually any unit, which is a super bummer. So most oftentimes, if a house like that comes on the market, it'll rent anywhere between 2,700 and 3,000. But once we break the 3,000 mark, there's very few people in the community here that's able to pick that up. So they just sit forever, and the owner bleeds cash so much on the front end that it makes it not worth it. It's kind of interesting in our market right now as well because the housing market is so soft where we're at that I actually have just listed our third fresh, brand new out of construction home for a builder because he hasn't been able to get them sold. And you probably already know, but construction loans aren't made to keep enjoying. You really need to get that off your books. And so now we're renting them. So for the property managers out there, that's another great way to maybe pick up some extra doors, get some relationships with your, top 3 builders in your area, and talk to them about maybe renting them out for a year until the market returns. Is maybe a great way to pick up some properties. Keep in mind that's probably going to be pretty short term. It's not going to be a long term solution. But what we found is a lot of times the uh, tenant will end up buying it from the builder, and if they don't already have an agent involved, then we can pick up a referral fee, usually equal 2 months worth, 2 years worth of management. So they can still turn into other monies elsewhere.
No, I love that. Yeah, if the build costs were a little bit cheaper, it'd probably be a really good marketplace for build to rent. We used to work with the builder a lot that he'd build a place, rent it for 2 years, and then sell it. And that was just his rinse and repeat strategy. It was really cool. But it's gotten a little bit tougher to make the 2 years cash flow. But as a builder, you sometimes can because they could keep their costs down. But for us who are not builders, that was a tough one to always swing. So uh,
Sure.
pretty interesting strategy. Okay, cool. So, like on a big macro level for yourself, what's your big mission to build wealth? Like, what's the why behind it?
Few reasons. One, launching a property management company at just about 40 years old wiped out all the cash I had and took quite a lot to launch it. So, definitely have some retirement to recover in a short amount of time. And now that I'm getting older, I mean, you can see all this gray and
And that's property management for you.
cash doesn't have as much time to work. So one thing that's important to me get caught up quick. We have kind of an interesting theory that we would love to have our kids around us as we're older, but my wife and I don't want them to take care of us. We don't want to have to lean on them for that. My parents had to do that. Her parents had to do that as they got older and really strange relationships. So we want to avoid that by being able to afford the care we need or, I don't want my kids cleaning my house, so to speak. So that's one reason. The second reason is to set an example for my kids that, if you work hard, you will hit goals and you can take great care of yourself and others around you. And then my wife and I also donate quite a bit of money to local charities because our community does house 4 of our children and 7 of our grandkids. So we're very passionate about making sure that our community does well. And, if you have the wealth to do things, then you can help a lot more than if you don't.
That's right. I love that. It just it snowballs in, doesn't it? So kudos. Aaron, thank you so much for your time. I love this conversation. I love that you are buying within the real estate and thinking, asking those questions, listening to clients, and then obviously have a cool perspective on building revenue in the property management company. Thanks so much. Any parting words before we end it?
One of the things that I think would be smart for most property managers to take a look at, and in some states it's harder than others, but we're doing incredibly well with our residence benefits package, how to grab some extra funds out of the tenants, but even more so, it's not about the money, it's about better care of the properties and better care of the owners. So we chose to do ours through Second Nature, but we've signed up just about 400 clients or tenants through our RBP, and now it's producing quite a bit of revenue every year for us. So make sure, and the smaller you are, the more probably more important this is and easier to roll out is those ancillary fees and things you can do. Extra service offerings are really, really important. And then lastly, I know with a lot of property managers that I spend time with that when a unit comes up and it's time for the owner to sell it, if they don't handle sales, they're not passing those off for a referral fee to a broker who can get that sold for them. I think everyone should entertain that if you're not, because there's times we get referral fees that are $4 and $5,000 at a time. So they're absolutely worth their weight in gold. So if you're in the property management game, I think you should really have a relationship with a broker where you can pass those along if you're not selling them yourself.
Two huge nuggets. Thank you, Aaron, for those. Sure. All right. Cheers. If today's episode hit home, share it with a friend and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one.